And we have Marty Masterpool, the auditor, here. Marty, since the people elect you directly, you can give us your pitch and explanation of the budget as you see. Kind of like, I have been asking other departments for their accomplishments from the year and their plans, goals.
Sure.
For the next year, you're not going to.
Well, I'll be here 6 months at least.
Most of the year.
Yeah.
So, goals for that period.
Thank you. And just very quickly, I'll introduce with me is my deputy auditor, John Hayes, and Eston Adams just ran upstairs because I incidentally grabbed last year's proposed budget, and then comes this year's. Had them in the same shelf. I apologize for that. But Eston Adams is our auditor one. Thank you, Eston. Quick year in review. I think you asked last year with regards to what was in the hopper or what was coming up at the time. We had just finished our parks facilities audit, which obviously you knew was a little controversial. Followed into the DPW GPS audit, which actually went fairly well, and DPW did recently switch under your authorization from an old 3-year-old GPS system to a new system that we maybe will review before the end of the year, or I would urge the next auditor to do so to see how the new system is comparing to the old. Cash and investments, as always, annually we do, and the administration, I believe, has done a nice job there and remains in as good a shape as possible under the financial situations. Residency has complaints still roll in, although before things that were being directed to our office and asked to be investigated from the personnel department has stopped. The direction, it appears the administration has decided to go in a new direction and handle that within the personnel department, and don't want me to do it, I guess. I haven't had a conversation with the mayor about that, but it appears that that's how they want to handle it, and that's that. We had, as you'll probably remember, living wage compliance review, and there was some complaints at the airport that the rate they were paying, the parking employees were paying the lower rate because they were offering but not providing health insurance. The Common Council very clearly directed that it had to be offered and accepted, and therefore there was about $30,000 in back wages that the parking company did pay to those employees. I know right before Christmas, one individual got about $10,000, so it was a nice little Christmas bonus for them, but something that they had coming to them that that they weren't provided during their regular paycheck. So I guess in a nutshell, those would be what I would call accomplishments of the past year. Moving forward, projections. Currently underway, we're in negotiations with DPW, conversations, I should say, not negotiations, with DPW regarding potholes, and I am aware that in the mayor's budget, they're talking about road cuts and adding crews, et cetera, that he rolled out. Probably a very good idea, seeing the condition of our roads, but we're really trying to dive down into the exact cost and when it makes sense to fill a pothole or pave a street or whatever the case may be. That's ongoing. We're doing a review of the city credit card policy and who has credit cards and what those bills look like, and if they're, the rules and regulations put in place for city used credit cards are being followed.
Sorry, Marty, how big of an issue is that? Are there a lot of credit cards out there? A lot of people.
Good question. So I probably asked the question at a difficult time. We just started about a week to 10 days ago. Dave Delvecchio is who has those things, and he assured me that he'd be getting those to me, but I don't have them yet, so I don't know. I'll tell you, a complaint came in. Okay. I mean, that was where it was. It was driven from a constituent complaint who felt that a department head was misusing a credit card, and I won't get into the specifics because until there's actual data, and we get a lot of complaints that turn out. We get citizen review board. I mean, we had a very angry citizen who complained all these things about the citizen review board that turned out just not to be accurate. until there's actual facts associated with it, I don't want to comment too much. But it's a review, and it might come up with something awful, or it might say policies are in place, everybody's following them, and they're doing a good job. Let me go back to a little history of when I took over the department, and really what I said all along and what I would like to include into this budget. The budget, fiscal year 10-11, which was the last budget before I became auditor, the total budget was $230,572. Last year's adopted fiscal year 18-19 budget was $167,599, which represents a 28% decrease from when I walked in the door.
Original number again? I'm sorry.
230,572 was the adopted 10-11 budget. Once again, that was the last before I came in, year prior. Last year's adopted 167,599. So, we're 8 years later at a 28% decrease. How did that happen? We had an Auditor 3 position that I essentially switched to an Auditor 1 position, abolished the Auditor 3 and created the Auditor 1 as a function, quite simply, of by civil service rules, Auditor 3s usually do audit work and supervise Auditor 2s and Auditor 1s. When there was no Auditor 2s and Auditor 1s in the department, I felt it was financially responsible to have an Auditor 1 position, and the supervision fell on me and the deputy. At the time, I also cut a secretary, in technology and everything else. Between when I'm not in the office, I forward the desk phone to my cell phone, and very capable of writing my own letters or emails or etc. So the way I wanted to operate the department was to answer those calls myself and not have a secretary, so I removed that position. However, all along when these things did happen, I said I wanted to return the department to the position in which I found it. Regardless of who the next auditor would be, I thought it was responsible to do so. Therefore, my submitted budget to the administration back in the budget department was very helpful and organized, and pushed me to get that in when I failed to respond quickly on a few occasions. But budget department was great. My requested budget included a secretary position. Back in, it remained with the Auditor 1 position, was $190,486, and basically the difference between last year's and this year's was I wanted to add the secretary. That still represents an 18% cut from the day I walked in the door. The suggested budget for this year that you have in front of you is has removed that secretary position that I requested, and set the budget number at $160,480, which represents a 30% cut from the day that I walked in the door. So I guess quite simply, my request is to add that secretarial position back into the budget. I don't believe it's irresponsible spending. It's still an 18. I would love anybody to find another department throughout city government that's 18% lower than it was 8 years ago. And that's it. And I don't believe I have intent on filling the position from July 1 through the end of my term. Everything, of course, is subject to change. So that may or may not happen. And maybe it would be responsible post-election day to fill it as a good transition, so you have some sort of let me talk about transition too. When I took over, and it was just the nature of a lot of different things, of probably previous relationship with the previous mayor and previous auditor. Door was locked, computers didn't exist, the phones rang but were under somebody else's voicemail. I actually there was no employees there. One had left and one was on family medical leave. I assure this council that won't. And to get up and running and operational, and I was hammered in the media for it for 6 months, and questioning my accomplishments, and basically having to start from zero and transition in was a difficult task, and I don't want that to happen to whomever the next auditor is. So I assure a smooth transition to work with my existing team and how everything is moving forward, because I think it's important. I think to be able to start on day one is an important step. So with that, that was a fairly lengthy introduction and explanation, but I would entertain any questions.
Marty, your professional service line dropped.
It
Can
did.
you explain that to us?
So that was, what I always called this is the Ken McCrisky money. Ken, and actually there's a very important part of the budget I left out, and that's a good question, so thank you. My professional services line was at $25,000 2 budget cycles ago, and I called that the Ken McCrisky money. Ken was a valuable asset. Anytime you can bring back someone with historic knowledge like Ken, or anybody else for that matter, is at a rate of pay that's less without healthcare and all the above, goes above and beyond, and I would recommend anybody to do the same. Last year, the administration asked across the board for cuts. I don't remember the number. I think it was 5%, but don't hold me to that. I'm drawing a blank on that. And I obliged and took it out of that budget line. I cut the professional service line because, quite honestly, Ken was in and out, and I wasn't sure of what his situation was going to be. So I cut that. I believe it was right in half. I think it was $25,000, went down to $12,500. I came upon a situation in January of this year where an employee was going to retire. I was able to bring him into the office. So I moved money with the budget department that needed, sign off from the budget department and the mayor. I created a position for the remainder of the fiscal year that needed sign off from the mayor and the budget department to add a administrative analyst was a title that we used. Brought in Bob Stamey as the administrative analyst. I hope he stays as long as possible because, once again, I feel that I'm getting an employee that's worth triple with knowledge and services and everything else. He is looking for other work. I mean, there's no secret about it. And I'm sure he will land on his feet here shortly. But I moved the professional services money, essentially zeroing it out, bringing it into the salaries line, created that position for the remainder of the year. Bob is in that position as we speak. I suspect that will all end. I know it's budgeted. It's all going to end on June 30th unless he decides to leave before that. And that line will go back down to where I found it, as I mentioned before, of the $2,500. I drawn a blank on yep, down to $2,500. So consistent with the conversation that I had earlier, is I'm doing my very best to put the department back to where I found it.
Do you feel you have a need to keep that at, is 2,500 sufficient for that?
I think so. I mean, it worked for me to increase it when I made those other cuts, so that if I needed staffing needs, or, look, quite honestly, there was, and you guys are all aware of it, there was law that we also could pay legal fees out of that. I did need some outside counsel, very small amount during the facilities audit. I was being accused of a few things, and I wanted to make sure that I was defended. That's where that money would come out of if needed. But I think 2,500 is sufficient. I mean, for this year. But look, the person sitting in this seat next year could change that or request something different. But certainly for the remainder of my 6 months in this position, I probably won't spend any of it, I don't believe.
Marty, if there were to be the additional position, what's the impact of that in terms of additional accomplishments, or what kind of additional bandwidth would the department have?
Great question. I guess I don't know if there even would be. There's, you're talking about a $30,000 secretarial position that and always can make, I mean, for staffing levels right now, if I have a person on vacation and someone's sick, you know, you're answering the phone, you're running up and downstairs or doing whatever needs to be accomplished during the day. I'm not sure, because and that was one of the problems or situations I didn't want to get myself into with civil service rules, was working out of title. So this would be the position I'm proposing is an appointed secretarial position. Really can't do audit work because it could be grieved if CSEA chose to do so. You know, there wouldn't be 5 more audits by adding this position by any stretch of the imagination. Could it make the office run a little more efficiently? Maybe. I sort of chose the lesser of 2 evils at the time.
All right, can we go back to when you were talking about residency?
Sure.
So that used to be under the audit?
Not really. So what used to happen, I think it's personal preference of the administration, I'll say, and I'm not sure either is right or wrong. The previous administration, the minor administration, chose to say any complaints or anything that comes in the door to personnel, refer it up to the audit department. We'd chase it down as best as we could without, you know, I didn't have an investigator, and I certainly didn't want myself or any of my staff running throughout the county on their car, creating different liabilities, trying to decide if somebody was sleeping somewhere they shouldn't have, you know, that they didn't claim to be their home. But those were referred up to us, investigate this, and we do simple tax searches with, you know, where's the complaint, where do they say they're living outside, do they own that, do they have a residence star exemption. I mean, we had one individual who claimed he lived in the city, but his city car was parked on Google Maps at the house outside of the city of Syracuse, coincidentally, I suppose. So those things used to be referred. The new administration has chosen not to do that. They wanted to keep that in-house and personnel. I think it's a little bit of policing yourself, personally. I think that's my professional opinion, but it's the Driscoll administration handled it in-house and the personnel. It's not anything different.
Do we know particularly who in personnel is handling that?
I do not. I just know that it's not being referred to me anymore, but I don't know.
And during the minor administration, how many people would come how many complaints would you get? How many?
And I still get them. I still get them, you know, regularly from DPW employees, and the city employee rumor mill will circulate quickly, and they'll say, call the auditor, call the auditor. So we're still getting them. It's just that I feel like I used to get all of them, because I'd even get the ones that went into personnel sort of referred up to us. You know, there might be a week where you get 5, and then in a month where you don't get any. It's just somebody gets a bee in their bonnet, so to speak, and gets angry with an employee or a department head or whatever the accusations may be. Right. I mean, it's
any like kind of net average, like in a year, what do you think you get? I mean, I understand it goes in floods and droughts.
Yeah, I mean, like, we easily get 20. I mean, I'm getting 2 a month at least. Okay. Still. And I don't know how many are coming into personnel. And you understand the reality of it. Employees get upset with things for the right reasons or sometimes the wrong reasons, and they'll just try to push and say that this person doesn't live where they say they're supposed to. Sometimes it's little personal vendettas or whatever. But the rules are the rules, and whether we're going to enforce them or not is, you know, that's a whole different story. And I readily will admit we'll field them, we'll investigate them as best as we can, and refer them back down to personnel. But it's not a two-way street at the moment, so that sort of has stopped.
So have you found any with the complaints to not live within the city?
There's certainly, there's plenty of the complaints that come in that it appears to, look, when you're parking a city-owned vehicle on Google Maps and they don't drive around every day, there'd be a strong coincidence that. And we had one that of the situation I mentioned. A complaint came in very specific to a house that the person said they live in this house. I believe it was out in the town of Salina. Simple tax search in the town of Salina, and the individual was getting a resident star exemption. Personnel said this was under the minor administration. None have happened I mean, the accusations seem to be solid, but no disciplinary action has happened recently. That individual's fired. It went to the arbitrator, I suppose, or some sort of court hearing, and the administrative judge ruled in their favor, and they got their job back. I mean, it's a hard thing to that seemed to be and I said, I don't know who the individual's cheating. They're either cheating the city of Syracuse by their residency requirement, or they're cheating the state of New York by saying they have a resident star exemption to live in that property.
And then one more quickie. How do you see the transitioning to HR be centralized? How do you see that happening?
You know, I have my personal opinion that it seems like an awful lot of work for one, if it's going to fall under one department head. I mean, you're turning two major departments into one department, but let's be frank, it could work. It's done in other places. It's done in business. It's done in bigger corporations. You know, I applaud the mayor for his effort to make some changes. It just, you know, I can go back to, you had a personnel director and a director of administration making a lot of money, and it seemed to, those two individuals that I knew of in the past seemed to be very, very busy, and you're turning that into one individual. But
it stops a lot of the nepotism, as
sure.
I get a lot of complaints about.
Yeah, no, there's pros and cons to both of it. That's my personal opinion. I mean, we certainly could do although I don't know if it would be responsible to do it in my term in the next 6 months, because I also feel that a lot of these changes, to do a good comprehensive review or audit, you know, you have to let it live a budget cycle or two and let the pros and the cons shake themselves out. Because that's the other thing too. The administration could say, we had it in one direction and we're transitioning a little bit because that didn't go as smoothly as we would have liked to have. But probably not a bad change. I mean, it's definitely been done in other places and seems to be successful.
Nader, do you have any, as a candidate for this office, do you have any thoughts, or you're good? I know, that's fine. Any other questions for the auditor?
And just in closing here, thank you for your time. Happy birthday, Councilor Driscoll. 21st. Are you 21? Can I buy you a drink? Or 23. All right. My only request, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for the 8 years here. I enjoyed it immensely, and putting that position back in would be appreciated.
What does the administration think about that, by the way?
Well, they cut it, so I'm guessing they don't want it. I didn't ask. There was no need for a fight, honestly, so I don't know.
So next year when you're the comptroller, still come back.
Or I'm happily selling insurance. Either is fine.
You can still come back to that.
I will gladly come to the council chambers as much as possible. Thank you.